His small, trembling hands hovered over the glowing phone screen. A single digit left to press. His heart thundered in his chest like a drumbeat, drowning out the faint sounds of the night. The boy, just 7 years old, sat curled up in the corner of his room, clutching his teddy bear in one arm and the phone in the other. He could barely catch his breath, his mind racing with questions he didn't know how to answer. From the hallway, he could hear muffled screams. His teenage sister's voice, panicked, desperate, cut through the silence. It came from their stepfather's room, a place that had always felt forbidden, heavy with unspoken rules. What's happening to her, he thought, his innocent mind unable to comprehend the full picture, but sensing danger. Tears blurred his vision as he gripped the phone tighter. Should I call? What if I get in trouble? But deep down, he knew he couldn't ignore it. Beep! The sound of his finger pressing the final one echoed louder than it should. It was done. As the line connected, a calm voice on the other end said, 911, what's your emergency? And just like that, a child's voice, fragile yet determined, began to unravel a story that would send chills down the spine of every first responder. But what happened that night? Why was his sister screaming? And what chilling truth would the authorities uncover when they arrived? Before we dive deeper into this gripping, true-to-life story, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. We bring you the most shocking, real-life stories that leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. Let us know in the comments how you would have reacted in such a terrifying situation. Now, let's uncover the mystery, step by step. The house sat in the middle of a quiet suburban neighborhood, lined with neatly trimmed hedges and streets that rarely saw excitement. To an outsider, it was the picture of normalcy. But within those four walls, the air was thick with tension, unseen by neighbors, unspoken by its inhabitants, but felt deeply by those who lived there. 7-year-old Ethan was a shy, thoughtful boy with big brown eyes that seemed to absorb the world around him. Despite his age, he had an uncanny ability to sense when something wasn't right. A skill born from years of living in an environment where unspoken rules dictated survival. His favorite things were his stuffed animals, the blanket his mother had knitted for him, and his older sister Emma, the one person in the world who made him feel truly safe. Emma, at 16, was a typical teenager in many ways. She loved music, spent hours scrolling through her phone, and dreamed of escaping their small-town life to attend college far away. But Emma was far from carefree. Since their mother's passing 2 years ago, she had taken on the role of protector for Ethan. She knew their stepfather, Alan, could be unpredictable, his anger simmering just beneath the surface, waiting for the smallest excuse to erupt. Alan had entered their lives shortly after their mother's death. At first, he had been charming, a beacon of hope for a family drowning in grief. But the man who had promised to take care of them soon revealed a darker side. His strict rules, cold demeanor, and volatile temper made the house feel less like a home and more like a ticking time bomb. Ethan avoided him whenever possible, and Emma did her best to shield her little brother from his outbursts. The house itself mirrored the family dynamic. By day, it was orderly and presentable, everything in its place. But by night, shadows crept into every corner, and the creaks of the floorboards seemed to carry secrets. Ethan's small bedroom was his sanctuary, decorated with glow-in-the-dark stars and drawings he'd taped to the walls. Emma's room, just down the hall, was a blend of bright posters and hand-me-down furniture, a reflection of her desire for individuality within the confines of their circumstances. Alan's room, however, was different. It felt off-limits, shrouded in mystery and an unspoken warning that no one dared to question. That night began like so many others. Dinner had been a quiet affair, with Alan scrolling through his phone, occasionally barking orders or criticisms. Emma had cleaned up the dishes, keeping Ethan close by her side as she always did. The tension in the air was palpable but familiar, something they had learned to live with. As the clock ticked past midnight, Ethan lay in his bed, clutching his favorite teddy bear. The faint hum of the television downstairs had long since disappeared, replaced by the eerie stillness of the house at night. Then came the scream. It was Emma's voice, piercing and desperate, coming from Alan's room. Ethan sat bolt upright, his heart pounding in his chest. The sound of a struggle followed, muffled but unmistakable. Confusion and fear flooded his young mind. Why was Emma in Alan's room? What was happening? Ethan's instincts screamed at him to do something, but he felt paralyzed. He thought of his mother, of how she would have known what to do. But she wasn't there. It was just him, a 7-year-old boy with a phone clutched tightly in his hand and a choice to make. This was no ordinary scream, and deep down Ethan knew it. He also knew that calling for help might bring trouble to their doorstep, might make Alan angrier than they'd ever seen him. But he couldn't ignore the sound of his sister's terror. Ethan's trembling fingers dialed 911, setting into motion a series of events that would change their lives forever. Ethan's trembling voice on the other end of the 911 call was barely audible at first. "My sister, she's screaming," he whispered, his words tumbling out in fragments. The operator's calm, professional tone worked to steady him. "What's your address, sweetheart? Can you tell me where you are?" she asked gently. Ethan gave the address, his small voice quivering as he tried to explain what he'd heard. "She's in his room. I think she's in trouble," he stammered. The operator assured him help was on the way, urging him to stay on the line. But Ethan hesitated, afraid Alan might hear him if he stayed too long. "Please, hurry," he said before quietly ending the call. Meanwhile, inside Alan's room, Emma's nightmare unfolded. She had gone to confront him after hearing him muttering angrily to himself. She thought she could calm him down, maybe even reason with him. But the moment she stepped into the room, the door had slammed shut behind her. Alan's expression had shifted into something she barely recognized, a cold, threatening glare that sent a chill down her spine. "You think you can talk to me like that? Like I'm nobody?" Alan spat, his voice rising with each word. Emma tried to remain calm, but her fear was undeniable. When he grabbed her arm, she screamed instinctively, hoping someone, anyone, would hear her. Ethan did. Minutes felt like hours, as Ethan crouched in his bedroom, his heart pounding with every sound. He could hear Alan's deep, angry voice, muffled but threatening, and Emma's cries as she tried to reason with him. The tension in the house was suffocating, and Ethan felt utterly powerless. What if the police didn't come in time? What if Alan hurt Emma? Just then, headlights swept across the front windows, and the faint sound of sirens grew louder. Relief and terror washed over Ethan simultaneously. He peeked through the curtains and saw the police cars pulling into the driveway. A sudden knock at the front door broke the stillness of the house. Alan froze, his grip on Emma loosening just enough for her to pull away. "Stay quiet," he hissed, his voice dripping with menace. But Emma didn't comply. This was her chance. She screamed again, louder this time, hoping to guide the officers to her. Downstairs, Ethan cautiously opened his bedroom door. The pounding on the front door grew more insistent, and the officers called out, "This is the police! Open the door!" But Alan wasn't going to make it easy. Suddenly, the sound of heavy boots thundered through the house as officers broke down the door. Alan's fury turned to panic as the shouts of the police filled the air. Emma seized the opportunity to run, bolting out of the room and into the hallway. Ethan watched from the top of the stairs, tears streaming down his face as Emma appeared, disheveled but alive. She spotted him and called out, "Ethan!" "It's okay now." But before she could reach him, Alan emerged from the shadows, his face twisted in rage. The officers rushed upstairs, shouting commands for Alan to stand down, their weapons drawn. Alan hesitated, his bravado faltering under the weight of their presence. In that moment, Ethan finally saw what he had only ever sensed before. Alan wasn't invincible. He was just a man. Emma pulled Ethan into her arms, holding him tightly as the officers took control of the situation. The house that had once been a prison was now flooded with voices of authority, safety, and justice. But the night wasn't over. As the officers led Alan away in handcuffs, Emma and Ethan were left to confront the emotional wreckage. Questions swirled in Ethan's mind. Would they be safe now? Would Alan ever come back? And what would happen to them next? Unbeknownst to them, the ordeal had only just begun. Alan's arrest was just one chapter in a much larger story, one that would reveal secrets and truths about their family that Ethan and Emma could never have imagined. The house was alive with chaos. Flashing red and blue lights painted the walls, their rhythmic pulse matching the frantic beats of Emma's heart. The officers had Alan in custody, his hands cuffed behind his back, but his piercing glare lingered on Emma as they dragged him out the door. It was a look that made her stomach churn, a silent promise of retaliation that she couldn't shake. Ethan clung to Emma's side, his small frame trembling against hers. He was safe now, but the weight of what had just happened hung heavy in the air. They both thought the nightmare was over, but they were wrong. "Miss," one of the officers said, gently ushering Emma toward the living room. "We need to ask you some questions." She nodded, her voice caught in her throat. Ethan followed closely, refusing to let go of her hand. The officer crouched to Ethan's level, his voice calm and steady. "You're a very brave boy for calling us tonight," he said. "But can you tell me why you called?" Ethan's wide, tear-filled eyes darted to Emma, searching for reassurance. "I heard her screaming from his room," he whispered. "I didn't know what to do, so I called." Emma squeezed his hand, her voice shaking as she added, "He grabbed me. I didn't know what he was going to do." Another officer entered the room, holding a small black notebook. His face was stern, his tone grim. "We need to show you something," he said. The siblings exchanged a nervous glance as the officer gestured for them to follow. He led them to Alan's room, once a place of fear, now a scene of investigation. Inside, the once immaculate space had been torn apart by officers searching for evidence. Drawers were pulled open, the mattress flipped, every corner scoured for clues. It was then that they found it. Hidden in a locked drawer beneath a pile of old papers was a collection of photographs. The officer's face hardened as he sifted through them, his expression growing darker with each image. Emma stepped closer, her curiosity battling her dread. What is it?" she asked, her voice barely audible. The officer hesitated, clearly struggling with how much to reveal. "These appear to be photographs of young women. Some of them look to be in distress." His words hung in the air like a thundercloud. Emma's blood ran cold. "What do you mean? What does this have to do with us?" The officer exchanged a glance with his colleague, then said, "We believe your stepfather may have been involved in other incidents. This might not be the first time he's hurt someone." Ethan's grip on Emma's hand tightened as he looked up at her. Confusion and fear etched into his small face. "What does he mean, Emma?" Emma couldn't find the words. Her mind raced as she tried to process what she was hearing. Alan wasn't just a danger to their family. He might have been a danger to others as well. As the officers continued their investigation, more unsettling discoveries emerged. Hidden among Alan's belongings were journal entries that hinted at a twisted mind, accounts of control, manipulation, and cruelty. The puzzle pieces of their stepfather's double life began to fall into place, each one more horrifying than the last. Emma's hands shook as she held Ethan close, shielding him from the grim reality unfolding before them. She thought she had known Alan, thought she had understood the limits of his cruelty, but this was something far darker. And then came the final blow. One of the officers approached Emma with a solemn expression. "We're going to take you and your brother to a safe place for the night," he said gently. "But we need you to know. You did the right thing. Both of you." Emma nodded, her heart heavy with a mixture of relief and dread. She had fought to protect Ethan, to shield him from the harsh truths of their world. But now, she realized, there was no shielding him from this. As they stepped out into the cool night air, Emma glanced back at the house that had been their prison. It felt like a lifetime had passed since Ethan's trembling fingers had dialed 911. The boy who had made that call had been scared and unsure. But now, standing beside her, he seemed older somehow, as if he had crossed an invisible threshold into a world no child should ever have to face. For Emma, the stakes had changed. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about rebuilding, about finding a way to heal. And as the police car pulled away, carrying them toward an uncertain future, one thing was clear. This was only the beginning of their journey. The ride in the police car was quiet, save for the soft hum of the engine. Emma held Ethan close, her arms wrapped protectively around him as he stared out the window, his wide eyes reflecting the streaks of red and blue lights still flashing outside their house. The chaos of the night had subsided, but the emotional weight lingered heavily in the air. The officers brought them to a local shelter, a place designed for emergency situations like theirs. The walls were painted in warm colors, and the staff greeted them with gentle smiles and reassuring voices. But despite the efforts to make the place feel safe, the siblings couldn't shake the cold reality of what had just happened. As they settled into the small room they were given, Emma sat on the edge of the bed, her head in her hands. Ethan climbed up beside her, clutching his teddy bear tightly. "Emma, is Alan coming back?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Emma looked at him, her heart breaking at the fear in his eyes. "No, Ethan," she said firmly, her voice stronger than she felt. "He's not coming back. The police are going to make sure of that." But the truth was, Emma didn't know what was going to happen next. Their lives had been turned upside down, and the future felt like a giant question mark. Would they have to testify? Would the court believe them? Would they ever feel safe again? The next morning brought a whirlwind of activity. Social workers visited them, asking gentle but probing questions about their home life and Alan's behavior. Emma did her best to answer honestly, though each word felt like a weight dragging her down. Ethan stayed silent, clinging to her side, his trust in her the only constant in his world. As the day went on, more information about Alan's past began to surface. The police discovered records of previous complaints against him, filed by people Emma and Ethan had never heard of. There were gaps in his story, details about his life before their mother that didn't add up. It was clear now that he had been hiding more than just his temper. Meanwhile, Emma began to grapple with her own feelings of guilt and anger. She blamed herself for not seeing the signs sooner, for not protecting Ethan the way she thought she should have. But every time she started to spiral, she reminded herself of the bravery it took for her little brother to make that call. "Ethan," she said one evening, as they sat in the shelter's common area. "You saved me, you know that, right?" Ethan looked up at her. His big brown eyes filled with a mix of pride and confusion. "But I was so scared," he said softly. "That doesn't matter," Emma replied, pulling him into a tight hug. "You did the right thing. You were brave when it mattered most." As days turned into weeks, the siblings began to find their footing. They met with lawyers and counselors, slowly piecing together a plan for their future. The legal process was daunting, but with each small victory, whether it was securing a restraining order or hearing that Alan was being formally charged, Emma felt a sense of control returning to their lives. Ethan started to smile again, though his innocence had been forever altered. He still clung to Emma, especially at night, but he also began to find comfort in the routines of their new life. The staff at the shelter encouraged him to draw and play, small activities that helped him process everything he had been through. For Emma, the hardest part was letting go of the anger she felt toward Alan. She knew it wouldn't help her or Ethan to hold on to it, but the scars he had left, both visible and invisible, would take time to heal. Despite everything, there was a flicker of hope. They had survived the worst night of their lives and come out the other side stronger. Emma made a silent promise to herself and to Ethan. They would build a new life, one where fear and control had no place. Months passed, and while life didn't immediately return to normal, because really, what did normal even mean anymore, Emma and Ethan began to heal. The shelter had become a temporary haven, but soon they were placed with a kind foster family who welcomed them with open arms. The new house was modest but warm, filled with laughter and the kind of stability they had longed for. Emma found herself looking out for Ethan even more, but this time it didn't feel like a burden. She wanted to be there for him, not just as a sister but as his rock, the way he had been hers during that fateful night. They attended counseling sessions together, where they learned how to process their emotions, face their fears, and build trust again. For Ethan, the nightmares came less often now. When they did, he would wake up clutching his teddy bear, only to find Emma sitting beside him, her comforting presence a reminder that they were safe. He was still the quiet, thoughtful boy he had always been, but there was a newfound strength in him. He had learned that being brave didn't mean being fearless. It meant acting in the face of fear. As for Emma, the experience had changed her in ways she was only beginning to understand. She felt a sense of responsibility not just for Ethan but for others who might be trapped in similar situations. She started speaking with other teens at the shelter, sharing her story to help them find their own strength. Over time, what had once been her deepest shame became a source of empowerment, a way to take back control from the man who had tried to steal it from her.
Legally, Alan's case moved forward. With the mounting evidence of his past crimes, along with Emma's testimony, he faced a series of charges that ensured he wouldn't be able to harm anyone else. While it didn't erase the pain he had caused, it brought a sense of closure that allowed Emma and Ethan to finally begin letting go of their fear. One quiet evening, as the siblings sat on the porch of their new home, Ethan looked up at the sky, now dotted with stars. "Do you think Mom is proud of us?" he asked, his voice soft but curious. Emma smiled, her eyes misting as she placed a hand on his shoulder. "I think she's more than proud, Ethan. I think she's watching over us and making sure we're okay." Ethan nodded, his small face lighting up with a contentment that Emma hadn't seen in a long time. "I think so too." As the stars twinkled above them, Emma felt a deep sense of peace. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but they were no longer walking it alone. They had each other, and they had hope, a small, steady light guiding them forward. For Emma, the experience had shown her the power of courage and the importance of speaking out, even when it felt impossible. For Ethan, It was a lesson in bravery, in knowing that even the smallest voice could make a world of difference. Their story wasn't just about survival. It was about resilience, about choosing to rise above fear and build something new. And as they sat together on that porch, the future felt wide open, full of possibilities they had once thought were out of reach. This wasn't the end of their story. It was only the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with hope, healing, and the promise of brighter days ahead. Stories like this remind us of the incredible strength it takes to stand up in the face of fear, even when the odds seem insurmountable. Ethan, a 7-year-old boy, showed us that courage has no age limit. His quick thinking not only saved his sister, but also exposed a truth that might have remained hidden. And Emma, through her resilience, proved that even in the darkest moments, there's a way to find hope and move forward. What did this story make you feel? Would you have acted as bravely as Ethan if you were in his shoes? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective matters, and we'd love to hear it. If this story moved you, don't forget to hit the like button and share it with your friends. It's a powerful reminder that even the smallest actions can lead to big changes. And if you want more stories like this, stories that inspire, shock, and remind us of the strength within us, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Until then, stay safe, take care of each other, and remember, sometimes the smallest voices can create the loudest echoes.